My long, two-pointed ladders sticking through a tree, toward heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill. Beside it, and there may be two or three, apples I didn't pick upon some bough. But I am done with apple picking now. Essence of winter sleep is on the night. This scent of apples I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight. I got from looking through a pane of glass. I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough, and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break. But I was well, upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stem end and blossom end, and every fleck of russet showing clear. My instep arch not only keeps the ache, it keeps the pressure of a ladder round. I feel the ladder sway as the boughs bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar bin the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in. For I have had too much. Of apple picking I am overtired. Of the great harvest I myself desired. There were 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, lift down and not let fall. For all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went surely to the cider apple heap, as of no worth. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep, as I describe its coming on, or just some human sleep. Today I will be analyzing the poem After Apple Picking by Robert Frost. The poem is written in first person, as you can see by the first person pronouns highlighted in pink here. It uses my and I, which makes it a first person poem. And so we don't exactly know that much about the person. We know they're picking apples on an apple farm, but we don't know if they're a worker on the apple farm or if they actually own the apple farm themselves. But it is plausible if they own it, because later in the poem it says, of the great harvest I myself desired. So if he's desiring the harvest, it must be how he makes his living. So he could be the owner of the apple farm. And so the situation throughout is that he's picking apples. It's been a long harvest. He's tired. And so he's tired of the picking apples, even though that's what he wanted. He's tired of it because it's it's labor intensive. And so he's tired. And this actually his tiredness develops through the poem with time and season. And so the progression throughout the poem develops with time as the narrator's life. It kind of starts to fade towards sleep from he was just picking apples, and all his actions subsequently fade away towards sleep. As it says, he was strangeness from his sight, magnified apples appear and disappear, the rumbling sound, overtired, desired, whatever sleep it is, and then some human sleep about it coming on. And so it starts off, he had just been picking the apples, basically getting tired because of such hard work. And actually, the poem develops in a somewhat disorienting manner, because it says the strangeness from his sight. So like there's things that he's seeing that aren't really there. The magnified apples are disappearing and appearing. And so it's just kind of like a disorienting, like things are just, the way he's looking at things is different, possibly because he's overexhausted, he's tired, and which is what leads to him wanting to just sit down, relax, and sleep. And so season also helps develop the situation, because apples are harvested in fall into early winter. And actually we know it's winter because he says essence of winter sleep is on the night. And so we know it's the late fall. And as Foster told us in How to Read Literature Like a Professor, seasons are very important in developing the setting. So it's fall. Fall is old age, life, getting tired. And so that's what's happening. He's a little bit older, we can assume. But he had just picked all these apples. He's getting tired. It's late fall. And so, but then when it comes into winter, because it's right at the start of winter is of death and old age. And towards the end of the poem, it says he talks about relating his long sleep to that of a woodchuck, which hibernates. So that's months of sleep. And he relates it. He's wondering, is he going to have a long sleep or like a hibernation like a woodchuck, or just some human sleep? And that long sleep like a hibernation that he kind of talks about kind of plays in to what I'll talk about in a little bit, is the meaning beyond the actual situation in the poem. it seems like it's the process of death through old age, because as I said, late fall symbolizes old age, and then winter symbolizes death. And as it seems, he's been hardworking, but as the poem moves on, he's getting tired and tired, and then he talks about his long sleep, and so we think that his long sleep, which he compares to the woodchuck's hibernation, could possibly mean that he's dying, which is reasonable because of the disorienting manner, the strangeness from his sight, magnified apples appear and disappear. It's like these illusions to him, which as you get older, life has just moved slower. It's a little bit strange, just the way you're viewing all the things that occur. So that plays into just death being one of the prominent meanings beyond the actual situation here. Throughout the poem, Robert Frost also creates many mental pictures or uses a lot of imagery throughout. And so he discusses the rubbing the strangeness from his sight that he got from looking through a pane of glass, the hoary grass. Some of the phrases he used just evoke strong imagery in your head. You just think about it, such as a fleck of russet showing clear. So russet is actually like the brownish color, like a russet potato, but a fleck of russet, the small, tiny little dots on an apple. And so he's saying every tiny little dot is showing through. And it's just very strong imagery that he's creating through these different phrases. And so these phrases that he says throughout, like the poem, all in all, it means it's like death is taking time. It's a slow process, somewhat disorienting. It's kind of, in a sense, like Alzheimer's. You start to just less and less. You start to comprehend like what's going on around you. Life becomes more disorienting. You kind of struggle to know what's going on. And Robert Frost also uses different forms of figurative and language and poetic devices throughout. Like, for example, in the first line, he uses an alliteration of the T sound when he says, "My long two-pointed ladders sticking through a tree toward heaven still." And so he's just alliterating that T sound, emphasizing it through the work. And later on, there's actually an anaphora of the word I. He says, "I cannot rub the strangest from my sight. I got from looking through a pane of glass, and I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough," which just goes to emphasize that it's a first-person work by repeating the pronoun, the first-person pronoun I. And so there's also another anaphora later on of the word of. He says, "For I have had too much of apple picking. I am overtired of the great harvest I myself desired." So it's just emphasizing what he's tired of. He's tired of the apple picking, even though he desired it and wanted it at one point. He's tired of it because of how labor intensive it is. And so that actually just embellishes that and helps make it more profound. And then right below that, he says, "There were 10,000 fruit to touch," which is a hyperbole, which just shows when you're working so much and through that repetitive nature, it seems like the apples are endless. Because as you know, orchards are ginormous. They have thousands of trees in them. And so in reality, there probably easily could have been tens of thousands of fruit to touch. And he, by repeating the word thousand, he emphasizes just the immense fruit, like how many there were. And then he also uses similes in some parts. He says the woodchuck could say whether it's like his. And so in this instance, he's talking about the long sleep. He's asking, is his sleep, then that he's tired, he's getting ready to sleep, is it going to be hibernation like a woodchuck? Or is it just going to be normal human sleep? And so throughout this poem, I mean, the figurative language and poetic devices just help emphasize different parts of the poem that Frost himself wants to emphasize. And so throughout the work, the general atmosphere is just kind of a tired and defeated mood. I mean, he's worked really hard, but he's just tired now. He's giving up. He's tired of picking apples. He's defeated. He feels like he's done. He talks about how if he lets them fall and strike the earth, then it's like they have no worth. He feels defeated if he drops them, but he's tired, and he's probably making mistakes, and that's probably why he references the apples hitting the ground. And so this also shows his attitude towards the subject. He's just tired and defeated. Again, it's just taxing work. At one point, he desired, it says, "Of the great harvest I myself desired." He wanted to pick the apples. He was overjoyed, overzealous possibly. We don't exactly know. But we could tell that he wanted to harvest the apples, but it's just such labor-intensive, tiring work that he's just tired. It's just taxing work. It's taxing him. probably taxing his body, and so he's just tired. And so the poem is actually, it's a free verse poem. It's one long stanza, and while he rhymes frequently, there technically is no rhyme pattern or form. There's parts where there is rhyme pattern, like he uses in the first 4 lines, he uses an A, B, B, A rhyme scheme. He says, my long 2-pointed ladder sticking through a tree toward heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill. Beside it there may be 2 or 3. So tree and 3 rhyme and still and fill rhyme, but then it doesn't rhyme for a couple lines. But he actually rhymes, it's interesting because he rhymes so frequently, but there's just no pattern. You have tree and 3, still and fill, night and sight, glass and grass, break and take, well and tell, end and bend, disappear and clear, round and sound, been and in, overtired desired, fall and all, stubble trouble, heap his, is his, heap sleep, and then gone and on. He rhymes multiple times. And when you're reading the poem out loud, you notice the rhyme because of the sound, like just how it sounds different, but there's no distinct rhyme scheme. So it's just actually a very interesting poem with how much he rhymes, but he chose not to follow a specific rhyme scheme. And there's no special form for the poem either. I mean, it's just one stanza poem, and that's really it. And so this poem, this can relate to everybody. The poem can relate to everybody in real life, because there's always things that you love and you love to do, but over time, if you do it so much, it's just you get tired of it. In the case of this poem, the main character he wanted to pick the apples. He loved it, but he just got tired of it. And that's just like everybody in real life, tired of doing something you enjoy. For example, myself, I work at Publix. I enjoy cashiering and bagging and talking to customers and all that. But if I'm working an 8-hour shift, I'll admit I get a little bit irritated, but I'll start to get tired, because even though it's something I like, it's just taxing. I'm standing the whole time. I just get a little bit tired from that. And so that just is it's how you can relate it to your life. And also something, although this isn't technically part of the CRD poetry response, I found it interesting. The first line where it says, my long 2-pointed ladder is sticking through a tree toward heaven still. There's actually a song called Highest in the Room by Travis Scott. And I know it's kind of weird, but the album cover, I thought, honestly, was very similar to the front line, or to the first lines, because it's a ladder. It's not sticking through a tree, but the ladder, you can say it's sticking towards heaven. You can assume that just because there's clouds, the ladder is sticking out. And I just thought it was an interesting, somewhat of a representation of the first line. But overall, it's just an amazing poem by Robert Frost. It's perfect for the fall mood, discussing just apples as a fall thing, the weather starting to get cold. It's just a great seasonal poem to read, and of course a great work by Robert Frost.